It's round 6 of the Formula One World Championship, episode 6 in the story of an amazing young Formula One talent. Britain's Lewis Hamilton is on pole position for the Canadian Grand Prix. Commentators here in Montreal, Martin Brundle and James Allen.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everybody. The biosphere there of Montreal, set up in the 1967 Expo, dominates the skyline of this wonderful city. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Montreal. And when Lewis Hamilton opened his hotel room door this morning, he will have seen his own face staring up at him from the front pages of the Canadian newspapers. But if he wins this race this afternoon, I think he'll be front page news all over the world. So can he do it? Can Lewis Hamilton convert his first pole position into that first victory? You bet he can. He's certainly more than capable, but there are a lot of traps and pitfalls lying in wait for him over the next 70 laps. It's a different kind of circuit, obviously, from Monte Carlo, where McLaren felt they needed to control the situation between their drivers, but it's very similar in one key respect. It's an easy race to lose. The harder you push here at Montreal on a circuit where it's only used once or twice a year and the offline is treacherously slippery, the harder you push, the more likely you are to hit the wall. And because we get cars hitting the wall here with some regularity and they're difficult to get out of the racetrack, we often get safety cars and they can play havoc with your race strategy. A 10-second lead can quickly be converted to nothing. Today then boils down to a battle of nerve, really, and a battle of cunning between Hamilton and Alonso. It's not ideal for either man to have to race against his own teammate. Both of them would prefer to be sitting alongside a Ferrari driver on the grid. There are rules to be observed through this difficult first corner here in Montreal. Mustn't take each other off, that's the first rule of motorsport. But both will be going for it, big style here this afternoon. Alonso says he can't win the championship this afternoon, and he's right about that. But we saw him taking some risks at the start in Barcelona, and it didn't pay off for him. And maybe Lewis Hamilton might just be able to take advantage of that. There is the front of the grid. You see Heidfeld outstanding in the BMW to take that third place. Some people believe Ferrari are carrying a bit of extra fuel because they didn't feel they could compete with McLaren in qualifying. They're trying something different from the race, but others feel that Ferrari are just off colour as they were in Monte Carlo. Mark Webber, looking for his first points of the season, starts in 6th place. Nico Rosberg has been fast all weekend. He could pick something up here this afternoon. Fisichella made a little mistake in his qualifying, could have been further up the grid. And then in the thick of the midfield, David Coulthard and Jenson Button. Not finding the speed here in Montreal. Button, the previous pole sitter from 2005. Ralf Schumacher again a little bit off colour in the Toyota. And Heikki Kovalainen, you see there at the back, he's had a nightmare weekend. An engine failure on Saturday morning dropped him back 10 places on the grid, but he only qualified 19th anyway after he became one of a number of drivers, Martin, to hit the wall this weekend. You've raced here many times. It's difficult to stay out of those walls, isn't it, if you're pushing like mad?
It is, and it's so nice to see a wall next door to the race circuit, actually, which challenges the drivers. It's bumpy, the curbs are variable, some of them very steep and aggressive, and you see the drivers really having to fight to keep the car on track, which I have to say is a pleasure to see compared to some of the billiard table circuits we go to. Not that they're all wrong, but it is just nice to see a guy having to keep the car from just skimming along the wall. And remember last year, James, the two-star drivers here last year were Michael Schumacher, in my view, and David Coulthard, the two wiser, older heads. And it was a race of attrition, drivers making errors, as we've seen all through free practice and qualifying. And, well, it'll be certainly interesting to see if Lewis, with such a posse of Grand Prix winners behind him and, of course, the double world champion, can he keep it out of the wall, keep his head? It's going to be supremely impressive if he does. They push the cars back a bit, switch off the traction control and lay a line of rubber down, and that's why they just move them back off the line, and just to give themselves slightly better grip away from the start itself.
Capacity 110,000 crowd here. No Jacques Villeneuve on the grid, the Canadian local hero of the last few years, but it's not put the Canadians off at all. They've turned out in their numbers throughout the weekend. A very impressive spectacle. Tremendous support for Formula One in this part of the world. There's the two contenders this afternoon. Alonso slow away, has he? No, he hasn't stalled it. He gets going, so does Heidfeld. And I think psychologically, Martin, it's a very, very interesting battle between these two drivers. Alonso can't afford, given how close Hamilton has been to him all season anyway, with no experience, he can't afford to let him have that extra boost of confidence that a first victory would give him, because he wants to keep him in his box, doesn't he? And keep him in his place. And if Lewis was unleashed, I think he might feel that he might become uncontrollable for Alonso.
Absolutely, and of course, next race, next weekend, Alonso traditionally has struggled at Indianapolis, so he needs to keep Lewis in check this afternoon. If we're right, we think that Alonso has about 2 laps more fuel than Lewis Hamilton. That's the story. It's the man I was drinking tequila shots with last night, and I've got a headache, and I hope he has too. And if we're right, then all Alonso's got to do is just stay close to Lewis through the early stages, and then just put the hammer down during the 2 laps. He can stay out a little bit longer to seize the high ground. And of course, it's the role reversal exactly of Monte Carlo, isn't it? There's a car down there on the, no, it's just equipment. There's so much equipment still making its way off the grid as they're around the back of the circuit on the warm-up lap.
Yeah, well, certainly pit tactics will be an important part of the game. We're expecting 2 refueling and tyre stops here this afternoon, and they turn them around pretty quickly in Formula One. It's the timing of that, and of course both types of tyre have to be used during the course of the race. We have a soft and a super soft tyre as we ride on board here with Kimi Räikkönen. But again, completely different sort of circuit from Monte Carlo, where overtaking is virtually impossible. Here, overtaking is quite possible, and there are several places to do it. We've got long straights leading into tight braking zones, just kicking a bit of dry ice there off the racetrack and the pit lane. And Schumacher, very interesting to see him continuing to come to races. I was talking to someone who was very close to him in his Benetton days last night, who said there was a guy who was so focused when he was a racing driver, and yet now he seems to be sort of drifting without any particular role, and it's very unusual to see Michael putting this much effort in after his retirement. A lot of people are very surprised to see him, but he's an advisor to Ferrari. He's certainly been helping Felipe Massa a great deal. And you can see how warm it is here in Montreal. 54 degrees the track temperature, 27 the air temperature. A perfect blue sky day for a Grand Prix. 70 laps coming up.
And the tyre warming going on, but it's quite a short run down to that first corner. And of course, they've got so little front tyre temperature when they get there. You can use the power to heat up the rears. And that is a BMW that's a long way forward in its slot. I think he'll get away with that, but it's so easy to overshoot the slot. And there's a little sensor in each grid position so that this man, Charlie Whiting, the race director, can know immediately, as soon as the start has taken place, if anybody was moving when the lights go out.
Christian Albers in the Spiker will start from the pit lane after some gearbox problems. Well, Anthony Hamilton was telling me half an hour ago that his heartbeat reaches 180 degrees. He measured it in the last race at the start of the Grand Prix. It must be going through the roof now with his son Lewis on pole position. When the 5 lights go out, the Canadian Grand Prix will be underway. Go! Alonso's away well. Lewis tries to counter him, and Heidfeld, there's a flag in the back, but it looks like Heidfeld's attacking Hamilton. Alonso goes to the outside as he evaded. He's run wide. He's cut the corner. If he takes the advantage, which he can't, he's done what he did in Spain. He's gone for broke, and it's cost him. Alonso loses out. Heidfeld's up in the 2nd place. Alonso drops to 3rd, and he's got a Ferrari nibbling all over the back of him. But Lewis Hamilton leads in Montreal.
Yeah, that's a disaster for Alonso. He's now got the BMW ahead of him, and just what Hamilton needs. Alonso way too deep into that first corner with cold front tyres and cold brakes. He was never going to slow down from there. Lewis kept his head. Luckily, when Alonso rejoined the circuit, he was able to miss him.
Well, Jenson Button, I'm afraid, has stalled on the grid, so he's being pushed off as I speak to you. Hamilton leads, Heidfeld is 2nd, Alonso is 3rd, Massa 4th. There is Jenson Button being pushed away. Rosberg up to 5th, Räikkönen is down to 6th. Fisichella up 2 places to 7th. Kubica is where he started in 8th. Mark Webber has lost out at the start. He's gone from 6th to 9th place, and Takuma Sato is 10th. There's Heikki Kovalainen there in the Renault, pushes through, and just look at the lead that Lewis Hamilton's established already over Nick Heidfeld, and now Alonso's got to think about how he gets past that BMW, which Martin has been very quick all weekend.
Yeah, Heidfeld's been driving beautifully, the car's well set up, and well, Alonso's just got to get on him and nail him very, very quickly. So a lot of, as we know, Alonso needed to stay close to Hamilton to have any chance of beating him in the pit stop phase, and that has not worked out at the moment. So a lot of work for him to do.
Well, Heidfeld is a second and a half behind Lewis Hamilton at the end of lap 1, and Hamilton's pushing even harder. He's 2/10 faster in the first sector alone, trying to build the all-important gap as Raikkonen gets the car a little bit twitchy under braking. The cars spent 20% of the lap time here in Montreal on the brakes, but 18 seconds of the lap is spent pushing the brake pedal. It's absolutely critical that the car is stable in the braking zone. One of the things that you have to have here as Button tries to get himself away, shaking his head.
Sounds like he's either got no first gear or the clutch is broken. And Alonso then lining himself up in the slipstream of that BMW. The McLaren is fast in a straight line, but he's a long way behind now on traction, coming out of the hairpin, and he'll not be able to have a go from there. Hamilton, meanwhile, easily the fastest man in the first 2 sectors, and his lead will have grown quite significantly.
It was 1.5 seconds at the end of lap 1 as he crosses the line now, and Heidfeld pursues him. It's gone out to 2.1 seconds, so he's taking 0.6 of a second a lap out of the field. Alonso still 3rd, Massa 4th, Rosberg 5th. Massa doesn't look terribly comfortable. He was got into turn 1 rather awkwardly last time through, and the Ferraris seem to be dropping away a little bit pace-wise. It's been a strange weekend for them in some ways. They just don't seem to have been able to dial their car into this racetrack. Looking there at Mark Webber, giving Robert Kubica something to think about.
Webber had a poor start. He's back down to 9th place, so he did not get away well, which is a shame for him after a great qualifying performance.
Well, we're riding on board with Mark Webber. Let's get some news from Ted Kravitz in the pit lane.
Yeah, down at Honda, and it's terminal for Jenson Button. He was a lap down anyway. They wheeled him back. They were trying to start him up. They tried putting the wand in, and they were fiddling around with the steering wheel, but it's terminal. They've given up, and they've retired the car. Jenson, from where I can see now, absolutely furious.
Oh, look, and there's the repair down at the turn 10 we were talking to Nick Heidfeld about on the start line. It's sort of like a white powder to try to protect the racetrack, and we'll see how that unfolds during the race. But at the moment, Alonso falling back a little bit from Heidfeld. We know Heidfeld's probably coming in about lap 19, quite a bit earlier than most, but Heidfeld now on the same pace as Hamilton. The gap remains at 2.1. Alonso's a further second adrift though.
Anthony Davidson there in the Super Aguri, the 4th British driver on the grid. Just in the slipstream as we look at Mark Webber, who's gone off at turn 1. Webber had a poor start, dropped from 6th to 9th, and now it looks like he's gone off the racetrack and lost quite a few places there. So although they're adding a lot of performance to this Red Bull car over every race, they're having problems getting the finishes in.
Hamilton got away well. The yellow flags are waving at the back for Button, and Heidfeld looked quite menacing down into turn 1. Hamilton was watching Heidfeld. Alonso decided to go right round the outside. I think he made a smart move to cut across the grass, otherwise he may have been penalised if he had taken the tarmac road there and cut out all of turn 2. And this is from Heidfeld in P3 on the grid, and he got away best, and he's thinking about a look down the inside. Has a sensible tablet, but he realised it wasn't going to happen. Meanwhile, Alonso charging across the grass. Well, he got away with it, didn't he? A much more significant bounce through the gravel in Barcelona, so hopefully he won't have too much grass in that radiator. This is the 2 Ferraris, and Rosberg touches the back of Massa. Both Ferraris connecting then in turn 2.
Raikkonen, sorry, Raikkonen tapping the back of Massa, I think.
Yeah, sorry. And then Mark Webber is going to go steaming into turn 1, having just passed Kubica, and he's gone into deep. And that, of course, then is a replay.
So it's interesting what happened with Kimi Raikkonen as Jenson Button walks in. Raikkonen started in front of Massa on the grid, and yet he was passed by him through turn 1, and it looked as though there was contact there, and the front wing just flexed a little bit on Raikkonen's car. What sort of lap times is he doing? Low 1:18.3s. Massa's doing 1:17s, but Raikkonen is tucked up behind Nico Rosberg, and that might account for some of the reason why he's struggling there. But it's interesting. Raikkonen needed the points here. He's 15 points behind Hamilton and Alonso going into this Grand Prix, struggling to establish himself in the Ferrari team, and there's a lot of long faces down at Ferrari about the performance this year of Kimi Räikkönen. It's not the man that they thought they'd signed as things stand at the moment. Hamilton leads then, Heidfeld second, 2.5 seconds behind him. Alonso's third, Massa's fourth, Rosberg is fifth, Räikkönen sixth.